Welcome. Good afternoon. My name is Lauren Williams. I am Adult and Community Services Manager here at the Columbia Public Library, which is part of the Daniel Boone Regional Library System. Welcome to today's Lunch and Learn, where we were going to learn about AI and democracy. Very excited about this topic. Today's Lunch and Learn is co-hosted by the library and the League of Women Voters of Columbia Boone County. We have people attending both in the room here in the Friends Room at the Columbia Public Library and on Zoom, so just a few housekeeping items. If you are on Zoom and you have a question, please use that chat feature to ask your question. We ask that you use the drop-down menu in chat and select that everyone can see your question so that people in the audience know what's already been asked. And when it's time for those here in the Friends Room to ask questions, I'll walk around with this microphone so that everyone can hear what's being asked, and including those people online. We are recording today's presentation, so it will be available in the next day or two on both the League's YouTube channel and the library's YouTube channel for future viewing. And I also want to highlight, we are going to be doing a couple of book discussions this coming year at the library about the topic of AI. And our first one is in February, the first Thursday book discussion. We'll be talking about the book, How to Think About AI, Richard Susskind. And if you register starting December 18th, we have a limited number of copies of that book for free for people to take home and read and come back and discuss on the first Thursday in February, which is February 5th. And now I'd like to welcome Barbara Hoppe of the League of Women Voters of Columbia Boone County to say a few words and introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Lauren Williams, and thank you to the Columbia Public Library for co-hosting our Lunch and Learn programs. I'm delighted today to introduce Scott Christensen as our speaker, talking about AI and the long-term risks to democracy and the practical guardrails communities can champion and try to get. And just a little introduction, I always have a great time researching people I already know somewhat. And Scott has a great background. Scott is an award-winning educator, author, and technology strategist who transforms complex emerging technologies into actionable insights for global audiences. He's Associate Teaching Professor Emeritus at the University of Missouri and former Director of the Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation. Professor Christensen has had a dedicated career to helping leaders and learners think critically about artificial intelligence, blockchain, and the Internet of Things without hype or complexity. Like plain English we can understand. Before entering academia, Scott founded and operated Kaleidoscope Consulting for over 20 years, where he managed large-scale technology implementations, information security projects, and early video conferencing systems. This extensive industry experience informs his teaching philosophy. The hardest challenge, this is a quote, the hardest challenge in technology isn't technical, it's helping people understand what these tools mean for their organization and for their future. He's the recipient of numerous teaching awards and author of many books, magazine articles, online articles, and peer-reviewed journal articles. He has also appeared in numerous radio shows and is often interviewed by the media. His background in education is he has an MA from George Washington University and a biology BA from the University of Missouri. So with that, please give a warm welcome to Scott Christensen.
All right. All right, well, thank you very much, and thank you all for being here. It's always an honor to get to teach. It's always an honor to get to share what you know. And I'm very honored to be here getting to talk with you all about this important subject today. Now, I'm going to go through a number of different things, and I'm going to reference different research, different articles, different statistics. And so what I've done is I've provided you a link up there, and I can provide it again when we're done, that links to all these articles so that you can explore them on your own as well afterward. So you'll find a section in this place here. Let's see, how do I go to the next slide?
Yeah, the arrow keeps up.
Doesn't seem to be liking that. Oh, there we go. There we go. So you'll find an area on AI and democracy, and you'll find a lot of the links to these articles there. Now, talking about AI in any context and is pretty difficult in these days. And especially so when discussing the impacts that AI has had and will have on democratic society. AI didn't begin with large language models like ChatGPT. The idea of a thinking computer goes back to at least the 1850s when Ada Lovelace articulated the concept of an algorithm that would give a machine the ability to think or the illusion that it could. By the way, she argued strongly against this notion, so much so that her argument today is known as Lady Ada's objection. Since then, we have entered the digital age, and AI has moved from theory to reality, first with algorithms that were programmed by humans that would take on human-like tasks, to the world we live in today, where AI algorithms, in its many forms, are created by the computer itself, with humans providing structure and, of course, massive amounts of training data so that the computer can develop pattern matching algorithms. How these systems work is somewhat opaque and certainly seems like a black box to us lay people. A large confounding factor when talking about AI is that there's a huge divide on how people talk about AI's future and its impact on humanity. At one end of the spectrum are bold predictions that superintelligent AI is just around the corner, perhaps as close as 2027, as has been predicted in this widely discussed and circulated paper. That paper is linked in the website that I provided. The authors of this paper predict that within about 2 years, AI systems will no longer just assist human experts, they will outperform even the very best human experts, especially in technical fields like software engineering and scientific research. By the end of 2027, the authors predict that systems will become superhuman researchers, able to design experiments, actually improve their own algorithms, and advance science faster than any team of humans could. Now, what matters on that curve there is that this is not just one AI that might outperform a human. These are systems that can be copied and run in parallel, thousands or even millions of times, working around the clock at speeds that we can't match. The authors argue that within just a couple of years, leading companies could have enormous fleets of these agents running at once, pushing innovation forward at a pace we've never experienced, and exposing our society to great risk while doing so. They argue that this could compress many decades of scientific and technological progress into just a few short years. The impact, they suggest, could rival or even exceed the Industrial Revolution, a shift so massive we're still living through its consequences 150 years later. Now, I'm skeptical of that analogy. I think it's disingenuous in kind of a quiet sort of way, because none of us actually lived through the Industrial Revolution, except for my friend Scott Crystal back there. He's old enough to have made it through the Industrial Revolution. But most of us only know it in hindsight, really stripped of the fear, confusion, and chaos that people experienced at that time. We only see the polished and romanticized version of that period of human history. Now, at the other end of the spectrum is the normal technology camp. And this is where I reside on the spectrum of possible futures. Us normal technology folks like to push back not only on the hype, but the story we tell ourselves about how change really happens. Forecasts like AI 2027 rest on a stack of very large assumptions that language models will keep scaling smoothly, that the missing technical pieces will all be invented in time, and that every supporting technology will improve at exponential rates right alongside with them. That's a big leap of faith. That's like me learning to swim this morning and immediately declaring that I'll be in the next Olympics. Okay. Learning to swim is a real skill, it's real progress, but Olympic level performance depends on hundreds of other conditions lining up perfectly. And I believe that just as I'm not going to be in the Olympics, we're not going to see superhuman or super intelligent AI in the next 2 years. Today's AI breakthroughs don't automatically guarantee that those forecasts will play out. Businesses still have to experiment, workers still have to adapt, laws and norms still have to catch up, and certainly energy and computing power has to scale as well. Now, some of you are probably familiar with the technology adoption curve shown here. This can be applied to everything from AI to varieties of seed corn. And this adoption process can take years or decades. I don't see how AI can magically escape this messy, slow process that every major technology has gone through. And so those of us in the public are left trying to figure out what pace of change is actually realistic and how we should prepare. And I will also say that it is a challenge for presenters like me just to keep up with the flood of AI-related research across multiple disciplines. And we certainly can't cover all possible concerns or issues on this topic. So today, I'm going to focus on 3 areas of concern when it comes to AI and democracy. The automation of political communication, the concentration of power over labor, and the erosion of trust in information sources. And then we're going to open the discussion up to you all, because I want to hear your perspectives. I'll do my best to answer your questions as well. Now, last week, once again, this field moves very quickly. Last week, a new set of studies in Nature and Science were published that looked at AI chatbots and what they might mean for our elections. Here's what the researchers did. They ran large-scale experiments with thousands of adults. People were invited to have short conversations with AI chatbots that were tuned to favor specific political candidates. Now, the participants didn't think they were being advertised to. They thought they were just having a conversation with the chatbot. And then the researchers measured what happened. And what they found was striking. After just a few back and forth exchanges, voters' political preferences shifted more than they typically do after watching a traditional political ad on TV. In fact, the chatbots were 4 times more persuasive than presidential campaign commercials. So how is this possible? Well, oops, I guess I had that as where we're going. Well, this is a quote from one of the researchers. One conversation with an LLM has a pretty meaningful effect on salient election choices. Okay? LLMs can persuade people more effectively than political advertisements because they generate much more information in real time and strategically deploy it in conversations. So throughout the paper, they call this information density. Okay, so a 30-second television ad or a digital media ad is tightly constrained. You get one message, one script, one angle. A chatbot is completely different. It can talk with you, respond to you, adjust to your concerns, and deliver a constant stream of supporting arguments tailored specifically to you. But here's the troubling part. Much of that information is not always vetted. The research found that a lot of the chatbot's persuasive power came from selective framing and, in some cases, outright inaccurate information. In other words, people weren't being persuaded by balanced facts. They were being persuaded by confidence, personalization, repetition, and volume. Now, to be clear, humans have always persuaded other humans with emotion, biased information, and misinformation. Sometimes at the university, we get very excited about ChatGPT and its use in cheating, and I have to remind people that cheating didn't start with ChatGPT. Okay? So this idea of manipulating perspectives one-on-one between humans, that's not new. What's new here is the scale. So for the first time, disingenuous or one-sided conversations can now be personalized and delivered to millions of people simultaneously. without public scrutiny that a TV or social media ad would receive. Now that raises some very big concerns for democracy. If automated systems can quietly influence voter opinions more effectively than traditional campaigns, and doing so by bending the truth, how do we protect fair public debate? For most of our history, political persuasion was limited by very human constraints: time, geography, money. You could give a speech to a few hundred people, buy a TV or digital ad, or knock on doors. But today, AI systems can hold millions of one-on-one political conversations at the same time. It can learn what you care about, tailor its argument to your values, and engage you repeatedly, all without you realizing you're part of a coordinated campaign. In a healthy democracy, we assume that people making decisions based on some shared body of facts, exposure to multiple viewpoints, and open public debate, something that the League is very well known for. But when persuasion comes automated, invisible, and personalized at scale, all three of these assumptions start to break down. There's also the issue of transparency. With traditional campaigns, at least we usually tell who is trying to persuade us. Ads disclose their sponsors. Messages can be challenged publicly. But with conversational AI, voters may not even know who or what is behind the message trying to influence them. And another research project that just came out fairly recently shows that simply labeling content as AI generated doesn't significantly reduce its persuasive power. Now we layer on another uncomfortable reality. The companies and powerful individuals behind these systems often have very specific policy and political agendas, especially when it comes to regulation. We saw this recently with the proposed amendment to the so-called Big Beautiful Bill that would have placed a 10-year moratorium on state-level AI regulation. These policy fights are not abstract. They directly shape who controls these tools and how they can be used. And the risks don't stop with campaigning. When policymakers try to understand what the public actually wants, automation and AI can also distort that signal. Now, some of you may remember the net neutrality debate a few years ago when millions of public comments flooded the FCC. It looked like a massive wave of civic engagement. But what we learned later was deeply troubling. The New York Attorney General found that broadband companies and lead generation firms were responsible for more than 8 million fabricated comments, about 40% of the total. They used automated systems, stolen identities, and even the names of deceased people. At the same time, a single college student used early AI-driven tools to submit millions more comments on his own. This was all before today's generative AI. Now we have systems like ChatGPT, which can generate human-sounding language at a massive scale, and even bypass safeguards like CAPTCHAs, those little things that ask you if you're human or not. Automation can quietly overwhelm real human voices and the very systems designed to represent them. Now in 2024, the House of Representatives passed a bill that tried to deal directly with the explosion of AI-generated content and mass-produced public comments. It was called the Comment Integrity and Management Act, and the idea was fairly simple. Federal agencies should be required to make a good faith effort to verify that public comments came from real humans. Agencies would also collapse thousands of identical submissions into one representative entry, while still reporting how many duplicates were received. Each agency would have to set a clear policy for handling computer-generated comments, and the General Accounting Office would have to study how much these comments are influencing rulemaking. Now, the bill passed the House, but never made it through the Senate, and since then, the issue has largely gone quiet. That silence matters because it means we still don't have a national policy for how to deal with AI-generated participation in one of the most basic feedback loops of democracy, the public comment process. So when we talk about artificial intelligence, it's easy to picture a future where everyone shares in the benefits. Smarter tools, higher productivity, new opportunities for all. And you'll often hear very bold promises from some of the most powerful people in tech about what AI will do for workers. For example, Bill Gates recently suggested that AI could eventually make a 2-day work week possible. The idea that machines will handle so much of the work that humans will only need to show up a couple days a week. He also said that AI will soon make things like expert medical advice and personalized tutoring free and commonplace. Now, those statements sound hopeful, perhaps even utopian. I mean, who wouldn't want to work just 2 days a week and still live very well? But for many workers, those promises seem deeply disconnected from lived experience. I know that I'm about 1,000 times more productive than I was when I started my professional career. I don't make 1,000 times more, nor do I work 1,000 times less. Okay. This is because in reality, productivity gains are rarely passed on to workers. We've already lived through multiple waves of automation, computers, software, the internet, robotics. And what did most workers experience? Not fewer hours, not dramatically higher wages. In many cases, they saw higher output expectations, tighter monitoring of their work, flatter pay, and more pressure to do more with less. The productivity went up, corporate profits went up, but the average worker's share of that gain barely moved. So when someone says AI will give us a 2-day work week, the obvious question is, based on what history? Faster tools don't automatically mean shorter hours. Very often they mean higher quotas. And when work does disappear, it doesn't always lead to leisure. It often leads to job insecurity, retraining, lower paid work, and the gaps that automation leaves behind. That 2-day work week assumes something even bigger than technological progress. It assumes that the economic system will choose to distribute AI's gains in the form of time and security for workers, instead of simply concentrating those gains as profit for shareholders and executives. That's not a technical question. It's a political and economic choice. So when we hear these optimistic sound bites, it's worth pausing. AI can increase productivity. The real democratic question is, who gets the benefits of that productivity? Workers or a very small group of owners? And once we start asking who really benefits from AI-driven productivity, the next unavoidable question is how the same technology is reshaping jobs, wages, and economic security for millions of workers. For years, every major wave of technology has come with the same promise. New tools will create better jobs, higher wages, and more opportunity. And sometimes that does happen, eventually. But in the short and medium term, the disruption is often uneven, uncomfortable, and deeply destabilizing for a lot of people. AI is no different, except it's moving faster and reaching deeper into white-collar work than in any previous wave of automation. Tasks that once seemed safely human, writing, analyzing, coding, designing, diagnosing, now can be done, at least in part, by a machine. What that does in practice is not simply mean that jobs disappear. It means that they often change first. When one person does the work of 2 or 3, entry-level roles shrink. The ladder into a profession gets steeper, and workers are told they must constantly retrain in order to stay in place. At the same time, many companies are using AI not to just automate tasks, but to monitor, measure, and manage workers more intensively. Algorithms now schedule shifts, track your keystrokes, score performance, and even flag workers for discipline or termination. The promise of liberation through technology often arrives hand in hand with tighter surveillance. Warehouse workers, delivery drivers, and call center employees already live under algorithmic management systems that optimize speed and output, but often ignore burnout, injuries, and job satisfaction. Now, despite decades of rising productivity in the US economy, wages for most workers have grown slowly, unevenly, or even not at all when adjusted for inflation. The gains from technology have flowed far more reliably to executives, shareholders, and those who own the systems. rather than to the people whose work these systems replaced or intensify. AI just threatens to intensify this trend. If one worker with AI tools can now do the work of several people, the bargaining power shifts even further toward employers. Think about customer service. One supervisor now oversees dozens of AI-powered chatbots. That certainly increases the output, but it also reduces headcount and weakens the worker's leverage. There's also a growing divide between those who work with AI and those who work as being replaced by AI. Highly skilled workers who can design, deploy, and manage these systems are seeing rising incomes and rising opportunity. Others may face displacement, de-skilling, or a race to the bottom in pay and security. Machine learning engineers and data scientists are in high demand, while clerical workers, basic analysts, and routine content creators are seeing increased automation pressure. And for many people, the deepest anxiety isn't just about losing a job, it's about losing predictability. Stable schedules become variable. Long-term careers become short-term contracts. Benefits become optional. Risks shift from institutions to the individual. Gig work platforms increasingly use AI to set pay, assign work, and deactivate workers, sometimes with no human appeal process whatsoever. So the economic question of AI isn't simply, will there be jobs? It is, what kind of jobs? For whom? And at what level of security? And who captures the value that AI creates? Now, these are not questions the market can answer on its own. They're choices that we make through labor policy, competition policy, education, and social safety nets. And this is a democratic issue, not just an economic one, because economic security and democracy are deeply linked. People who feel economically stable are more likely to vote, to engage in their communities, to trust institutions, and to believe the system works for them. But when large numbers of people experience job insecurity, stagnant wages, unpredictable schedules, and constant surveillance at work, something else happens. Trust erodes, cynicism grows, participation drops, and anger becomes easier to mobilize. If AI accelerates job displacement, concentrates wealth, and shifts risk onto individuals, it doesn't just reshape the labor market, it reshapes the political landscape. Economic insecurity makes people more vulnerable to misinformation, more distrustful of institutions, and more receptive to extreme narratives that promise simple solutions to complex problems. So once again, AI is not just changing how we work, it is quietly reshaping the conditions under which democracy itself functions. Who feels heard, who feels left behind, and who believes the system still represents them. And as AI reshapes who works, how they work, and who benefits, it is also reshaping something even more fragile than the labor market, the information we rely on to make sense of the world. To understand how AI is reshaping trust itself, we need to start a little bit farther back. Before today's chatbots and deepfakes, when machine learning algorithms were first deployed across social media and advertising platforms. More than a decade now, companies like Google and Facebook and others have trained powerful algorithms on massive data sets about us, our clicks, our likes, our spending habits, our income levels, our locations, and increasingly our political views. The original goal wasn't political at all. It was engagement. Keep us on the platform longer. Learn what holds our attention, and then show us ads at exactly the right time from the right companies. So anytime that you log into one of these systems or check Facebook on your phone, I want you to remember that the purpose of you doing so, or the reason you're doing that, is not to connect with friends or send messages or search for something. It's to be there to be shown an ad for yogurt. Okay. So just think of yogurt ads the next time you log in. Now, this business model has been extraordinarily successful. These platforms don't make billions by charging users for their services. They make money by monetizing our attention and our time. But the social costs of that system are now impossible to ignore. One of the most important consequences has been what was originally dubbed filter bubbles in a book from 2011 called The Filter Bubble: What the Internet is Hiding from You. The author of that book warned that web personalization and algorithmic curation were steering us each into our own individual information loop. When today's platforms optimize for engagement, they show us not the broadest and most balanced view, but content that confirms what we already believe, that catches our eyes or triggers a strong emotion, because that's what keeps us scrolling. Over time, what we see shapes what we expect to see. And many begin to inhabit a version of the world that is narrow and less connected to the experiences of people who think differently than they do. Now, a major study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences showed how algorithmic curation doesn't just reflect existing polarization, it actively deepens it. When people are repeatedly exposed to ideological consistent content, their views become more extreme, their trust in opposing viewpoints declines, and their willingness to engage across differences shrinks. So long before generative AI entered the picture, we were already in an information environment that encouraged division, not necessarily because of ideology, but because conflict and confirmation are profitable. More recently, this environment has been further transformed by automation and bots. In the past year, investigative reporting revealed that a significant number of highly influential political accounts on X, formerly Twitter, were not being run by real people at all. Many turned out to be automated. And recently, when location data became available about these accounts, it was clear that a substantial number were not even based in the United States. Yet they were shaping American political conversations in real time. They're amplifying messages, creating artificial consensus, and in some cases, stoking outrage. The important point here is not just that bots exist, it's that they exist in the same engagement-driven systems that already reward emotional, polarizing, and sensational content. Automation doesn't just add more voices, it changes the balances of voices. And then there are deepfakes. So you may have seen this deepfake of President Obama from quite a few years ago.
We're entering an era in which our enemies can make it look like anyone is saying anything at any point in time. We're entering an era.
So these systems have improved dramatically since then, and we now live in a world where AI can generate highly convincing audio, video, and images of real people saying or doing things. That was not President Obama, that was a completely computer-generated version of President Obama. Now, some of these deepfakes are crude. That one is fairly crude and easy to spot. Others are increasingly subtle, especially when synthesized audio is layered onto video. This is an example from 2024 that used a deepfake version of Jill Biden's voice, which is harder to detect if it's actually deepfaked or not, with authentic video footage. Okay, so to the casual user, it's really hard to determine if this is real or not.
It's Joe Biden, and I want to tell you about my husband, Joe. Joe is the world's biggest cheerleader for the atrocities happening now in Gaza.
The United States stands with Israel.
Now, the right-wing extremist government of Israel is raining down hell on Palestinian civilians. They've killed over 1,000 children in the last few days. This is a genocide.
So to the casual viewer, this sounds and looks completely real. And this is where timing becomes critical. Imagine a clip like this being released the night before a primary. By the time journalists investigate, by the time platforms respond, by the time experts verify the source, millions of people may have already seen it, shared it, and formed impressions based on it. The truth might eventually come out, but the damage will have been already done. Deepfakes don't need to last forever to be effective. They just need to last long enough. Now, one of the consequences of deep fakes is something called the liar's dividend. The liar's dividend is an idea that once deep fakes become common knowledge, the very existence of this technology creates a new type of uncertainty. When anything can be faked, then everything can be denied. Real video can be dismissed as fake. Authentic audio can be waved away as AI generated. We've already seen examples of this dynamic. In one recent case involving a protest in Boston, real footage and reporting were widely dismissed by some as fake news created by AI, even though no deepfake had actually been used. The mere possibility of synthetic content was enough to undermine trust in verified reporting. So deepfakes don't just introduce falsehoods into the information ecosystem. They also weaken the credibility of true information. This brings us to where we now find ourselves, living in a zero trust world, a world that is increasingly difficult for the average, busy, overworked voter to determine what is real, who to trust, and how decisions about their lives are being made. Trust in institutions is eroding, trust in media, trust in government, trust in expertise, and even trust in each other. This is one of the most profound democratic consequences of AI. Democracy depends on a shared baseline of reality. Now, we don't have to agree on everything, but we should have some common ground about what is happening in the world. When that foundation erodes, public debate becomes harder, accountability becomes weaker, manipulation becomes easier. We're not just facing a technical challenge here, we're facing a civic challenge. How to gain trust, how to sustain trust, truth, and shared understanding in a world where seeing is no longer believing, and where silence, doubt, and denial can be engineered at scale. Now, when we talk about AI's impact on democracy and the economy, it's easy to feel like we are at the mercy of giant companies, but communities still have agency. There are practical guardrails we can champion together to ensure AI supports democracy rather than undermines it. First is transparency and accountability. We need to know how these systems work. Independent audits of AI tools can provide clear information about how these systems arrive at their answers. And when AI is creating content, platforms should tell us if and how the scale has been tipped in favor of a certain viewpoint or candidate. Second, antitrust and decentralization. The EU's recent investigation into Google's AI practices, probing whether the company used publishers and creators' content without fair compensation, shows that regulators can challenge monopoly behavior. If Google is found to have unfairly locked up this data for itself, it could face fines of up to 10% of its global revenue. We need similar oversight here at home, and we should support open source and public interest AI projects to democratize access to these powerful tools. Third, education, specifically media awareness. We often hear people talk about digital natives, as if some younger generation has some innate mastery of the online world simply because they grew up with a smartphone. Being comfortable swiping a screen or posting a video does not mean you have the skills to navigate an information ecosystem designed to manipulate your attention. There are no digital natives, only digital consumers. None of us, regardless of age, are born with the tools to be able to reflect on the content that we're being served today. Digital literacy is therefore not optional. It is more than knowing how to use an app or device. It's about understanding how algorithms shape what you see, recognizing misinformation, and distinguishing human voices from machine-generated ones. And it's about having the critical thinking skills to pause and ask, who made this? Why am I seeing it? Do I trust it? Fourth is safeguarding rights and privacy. We need privacy laws that stop personal data from being used without consent, explicit safeguards so that individuals aren't targeted with deepfakes or other AI-driven abuse. Building these guardrails into AI systems from the beginning isn't just a matter of ethics, it's essential governance. And finally, civic engagement and deliberation. democracy lives in a conversation, and that conversation has to be trustworthy. That's why community forums, classrooms, and town halls are important opportunities to step outside our filter bubbles and interact with our fellow citizens. Now, AI is a powerful tool that can either strengthen democracy and provide shared prosperity, or it can undermine them. Studies highlight how AI can automate persuasion, centralize power, and erode trust, but also how they can stimulate innovation and create new opportunities. The difference depends on the guardrails we put in place and the values that we uphold. So thank you very much for your time. If you want to reach out to me and tell me I'm full of it, you can do so via this website. With that, I'll open it up to questions or comments. Yeah.
Have you ever read line by line? Have you ever read line by line an AI program?
Not a,
Do you know anyone who has?
oh, I do not personally know anybody that has. You can certainly, in my classes, we actually teach an AI program that's a machine learning classification. So being able to identify, a chair versus a water bottle, those are very fairly simple programs nowadays. But when we're talking about these generative AI systems, they're massive data sets, and we really do not know how they work. And even the people that own and operate these systems don't know how they work. So you look at Anthropic as one of these companies, and they publish papers like, hey, we just figured out how our system works. Okay? So they really are a black box. They're great word calculators, they're powerful tools, but they're a little bit of a mystery.
What now? So as a member of the league, part of our mission is to educate and inform. How do we then move forward? Next year is an important election year. First of all, we have to educate people as to how to decipher what and how do we even instruct them so that we can get to the education piece that we would typically deliver.
Well, I think the good news is, especially with the generation of people that I interact with or interacted with at university, the college students, is they know something's wrong. They don't know exactly what it is, but they feel like there's something wrong. They feel overwhelmed. They feel like they're wasting a lot of their time with these TikToks and things like that. They don't know how to deal with it. So I think it's a matter of kind of like providing help to somebody that's addicted. We have to think of it that way. Think of these AIs not as some great tool that's free to you, but as a way for a company to make a lot of money. This is the way when you start to talk about cigarettes with young people and you say, oh, this is a way for this company to make a lot of money.
Or sports gambling, or
right.
You can see it happening.
Yeah.
So I have a question, Scott. Can you tell us like what other countries are doing to put guardrails? Some of the best examples, are they starting now?
Yeah, so the EU is probably the foremost as far as putting in guardrails. There have been more authoritarian models that we don't necessarily want to look toward, I don't think. But the EU has been looking at this as things like your right to be forgotten, your right to privacy, the right to control information about yourself is much more strong in the EU. I would say that our legislators, both at this Capitol as well as in Congress, don't understand this technology, don't put a lot of effort into understanding the technology, and have been captured by these large tech companies. Google has more people on Capitol Hill than there are staffers. Okay, so they're totally overwhelmed. And you look at some of the bills that they do propose, and they're very distracting. Like there's one that's been pre-filed in the General Assembly that is going to prevent people from getting married to AIs. Like that's a big problem. How about just a right to privacy, right to online privacy? Let's start there. But they're not starting there because they're not serious about this topic, but they want to show that they've done something with AI.
There's a Zoom question. To clarify, is the provision prohibiting regulation of AI part of the so-called big?
It did not pass this, it got kicked out in the Senate. So it is not part of the big beautiful bill, but I expect to see that come back again in some film.
I have a question.
Okay.
Somebody. We can often focus on what is wrong with AI. Can you enumerate some of the good you see from this tool?
Oh,
It's not going away.
It is a powerful tool. I call it a good word calculator. And I tell my students it lets me take a 5-hour task and bring it down to a 3-hour task. The bad thing about these systems, and once again, you ask for the good things, is that you have to put in the effort up front. Okay, you can't just ask it a blank question. I was working with a nonprofit and we needed to file a letter of intent to apply for a grant. Well, okay, I can sit down, it'll take me a day to write that, to outline everything. But I've already got 50 pages of well-written prose that's been very well edited, okay? So I take that 50 pages, I upload it, I say, here's the points I want you to draw on, here's how we're going to use this money. I provide, 20 minutes of my effort to make sure I have a really good prompt on what I want. And it does a fantastic job. Okay, so it took a full day's work and probably honed it down to less than an hour. But somebody else had already put in the effort ahead of that. So the real problem with these word calculators is if you think about Excel, if you say add 25 to chair, okay, this doesn't make sense. You're trying to add a number to a text field. It'll say error in formula. ChatGPT will be, if you ask it to do that, will say, wow, you're really thinking outside of the box about chairs and their numerical significance. And here's how we could do this. Okay. They will always give you an answer. They don't just say, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Okay. And this is a real problem with these AIs. And you find that people are kind of, there's some other problems where people are kind of being driven almost to a psychosis. Right, so they're chatting with these things like it's a real person, and they're getting led down these rabbit holes that are just concocted, fabricated information. There was one guy that thought he had a breakthrough, that he had invented a new type of physics. He was just some average Joe, but the chatbot was just agreeing with him the entire time.
I forgot something.
So I find this all fairly terrifying, but, and I heard about, that AI will generate papers with references that don't exist. One of the things that concerns me about it is the amount of energy that it takes to run these data centers. And, is it gonna just upend any efforts at, doing something about global warming?
Yeah, you see that a lot of these companies have now kind of abandoned their original ideas about we want all our data centers to be green data centers. There's a rush to become, to basically lock in users. They're trying to figure out a way to lock in users. Essentially to become the next Google. Well, the next Google is going to be Google. Yeah, so a lot of these folks are avoiding that whole thing entirely. There's other problematic things with the way that AI is influencing the economy. So the stock market growth this year, most of that can be attributed to about 10 AI companies that do these circular deals. And Bloomberg has had some really good reporting on this, as well as the Wall Street Journal. Also, these data center build-outs have basically propped up the GDP as well. It's like last quarter was like 3.1. If you take out data center build-outs, it comes down to 1% growth in GDP. So it's a huge concern. I don't know, given the regulatory capture, what we can do about it. Well, sorry, I don't have a better answer.
It's a great point there. Just a second ago, I was told a month or so back by a cybersecurity person that remove AI from our market, we're in a recession.
Yeah,
Put that aside, job loss and everything that's going on right now, some of it because of AI. We have the biggest stretch of job loss this year since the pandemic, and nobody's talking about it. When you talk to your students, I would always start with any platform you're using for free, you're the product. I think that's a great way to get them to, you mentioned they're struggling with their addictions to TikTok or something. I don't know how young people think, but I was raised to, if you think like you're getting ripped off, vote with your wallet or vote with your feet, just leave.
right.
And I don't know I don't know if kids understand that now. They're basically being mined for information, and that's the bottom line. It looks, it's wrapped up pretty and a lot of fun and giggles, but you're basically, somebody's doing a job on you.
Yeah, and you start to see a lot of these addictive type of things coming into platforms like Robinhood, which was about investing or crypto investing, and now with, online sports betting. It's very disturbing as far as the trend. But I will say that some of my students, I would actually give them an assignment to take a 5-day break of all social media. And then write a reflection on it. And it's very interesting because a lot of people, it's kind of like it kind of crept into their lives. There's a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit there. And then eventually they found, when I grabbed some students' smartphone, if a student was on their smartphone, sometimes when I was talking, I'd just grab it out of their hands and I'd check the number of hours they spend on social media. And I say, well, how many hours do you think you spend a day? And they'd be like, oh, 1 or 2. And I go, no, you spent 6 hours a day. That's almost an entire full-time job. So I think having some way to break that cycle, I don't know, but it is an addiction. Yeah.
This is a good moral question from a Zoom participant. I'm building my own mobile game. Am I cheating by using AI to help me build it? What the university told me would cost $50,000. I'm not a game developer by degree. Using AI has made me morally feel conflicted.
Okay, so first of all, there's something called vibe coding where you're actually using these tools to produce computer programs. It's highly effective. It works fairly well, but I always call it vibe prototyping, okay? Because you may want to prototype it, take your game, share it with your friends, see how they use it, see how you can modify it, then show some traction, see if you can get some funding for it and move forward. Because the problem is, one, it may not scale. So it may be fine with 20 people, but the way the AI is programmed it may not scale to 100,000. It also could have major security holes in it. And that's the other we have a security expert in the back here. That's one of the other big issues. And there have been numerous cases of people leaking data that way. Yeah, did you have a question?
I have a question if we got time to.
Yeah. We've got all afternoon.
Well, I'm so excited that I got to see you speak. This is the first time I've got to, I've met you before, but seeing you speak, great job. You mentioned how AI by 2027 was going to kind of be super AI. One of my concerns with that is the biases that we have in our data, in our research already. I feel like that's just going to exacerbate the problem and create a bigger gap in what we need to be looking at, what we're not looking at, and how do you see that shaping the holes that we already have in that program?
That's as I said, on the other end of the spectrum, it's not idea I totally subscribe to, but you're certainly right. As these things scale, as they train on our data, that they're getting more biased in the way that they view things. I think that, it's been said for a long time that we need kind of an FDA for data. So we need to know what data is being used for this. How is our data being used? And what are the weights you can look in some of these systems at the weights that are being distributed, but it's very hard for the individual to understand this, how that works. We're now putting a huge amount of tasks on the individual. And this is kind of the externalities. So we talked about energy as and impact on the climate. That's an externality that the society has to absorb from these AI companies. And now we're looking at all the things that we have to absorb about the impact on the information that we're using, on our perspectives, how it's changing the way our brains work. And, you know, from a professor's standpoint, now you have to do all this extra stuff to try to make sure students aren't using AI. Well, who pays for that? Certainly not the AI companies.
Getting back to AI in terms of the videos and the chatbots and all, I don't think there's a good answer for that. But is there any clues or things that can identify something as being made for AI?
Yeah, so and with text, it becomes increasingly difficult, but that Biden one was actually, there's a company that did detect changes in the audio, and so they knew that it was in fact not Jill Biden. And with video, it's a little bit easier. There are several different ways that it can be done to work out a balanced probability that this is deep fake or not. Frankly, is probably harder. Well, I take that back. And never mind. Yes, there are some ways you can do
Is
that.
there any way that an individual, without using a tech company?
No, these are fairly advanced systems, and you'd have to pay for a subscription. So it's
Do social media companies, look to detect deep fakes and then remove them like Facebook?
no, not anymore. Facebook has disbanded its kind of a group that would do that kind of fact checking. Okay, so it might get labeled. Okay, so different mediums have ways for users to label things, but it will not get taken down unless it is a direct, violation of a law like, underage people, something like that. There are several states that now have a patchwork we have a patchwork in the United States of deep fake laws that basically say that, like in Texas, it's a crime to create a deep fake of someone else without their agreement to it. So here in the United States, if somebody was to create a deep fake of me, it would not necessarily be a crime unless they are trying to harass me in some way or conduct some other fraudulent activity. And if it embarrassed me or made me feel bad, I would have to go to a civil court and sue them and then testify about how that was. So there's nothing restricting somebody from making a deep fake of someone else in Missouri right now. Once again, I think these laws are a patchwork and it's not necessarily the greatest solution, but our Congress has just been asleep at the wheel. We've had the web for what, 30, 40 years, and we have no privacy laws really passed. I mean,
Okay, Scott, I've got a comment and a question from the Zoom audience. And I'll say the comment first because it's pertinent to what you're talking about. This says headlines today that our president plans to sign an executive order that would prevent states from creating their own regulations on artificial intelligence. So.
Yeah, that'll be challenged. Yeah.
The question is, do you know if anyone is working to rein in, and you probably know the software company better than I do, PALANTIR, that uses AI to collect and integrate massive amounts of data about Americans?
Yeah, not in this administration. The Palantir folks have been actually behind the current administration in a big way. I don't see any effort by this administration to try to regulate that at all. Yeah, there's one more question or? Yeah.
Comment question, we got, hold on. And then.
So I know different AI tools can be programmed with sort of different, I guess, base opinions. Like, for example, like Grok, if you're asking a question, won't say certain things about like Israel or South Africa, or, is there, on an optimistic note, what do you think you see as far as the chances that maybe these tools need to be programmed with like do no harm sort of baselines, like if it's gonna be used in like government or like large companies, like how to optimize like human outcomes?
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I think some of that was gonna come from the courts. Right now, there are 2 civil lawsuits against character AI from families who had a teen that committed suicide because the AI chatbot encouraged it. I think we're gonna see these companies implement guardrails, not because it's the right thing to do, but because of liability. So I hope that those are really good lawyers and they get hundreds of millions of dollars. And the other problem with these companies is that you look at like, the Federal Trade Commission issued a $5 billion fine against Facebook, right? A number of years ago. That was the biggest fine that they'd ever levied. Okay, that's a parking ticket. Yeah, that's, it's just the cost of doing business, okay? So that's really difficult when you're looking at the scale and these kind of monopoly companies. Great, well, I'll hang out if you got other questions. Like I said, you can send me rants and stuff. Do that.
Thank you so much, Scott, and I'm sure we'll have to do a follow-up next year. This is ever continuing, changing area, but there was a question regarding data systems and data centers. And so I wanted everyone to know that our next Lunch and Learn program, January 14th, will be on data centers. And John Kaufman, who is a former, is a former city council person, now lives in St. Louis, and he is a nationally recognized attorney with the Consumer Council on Utility Regulation and Public Policy, and former director of the Missouri Office of Public Counsel, and teaches about energy utility law at Washington University. Will be here January 14th, and we will also have someone from the Sierra Club talk specifically about the climate-related effects of data centers. So if you're interested in that, please come January 14th. Again, thank you, Lauren Williams and the library for co-hosting. Have a great holiday and see you in January.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
You probably have a son who went through one of those.
No, I don't.
All right here. Okay. And you. Yeah, you foresee us.